With the first pick,
Thunderstruck! Thunderstruck! Yeah, Thunderstruck!
Welcome to the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. Stadium Rant has great content on all social media platforms and YouTube, so make sure to check it out. Today on Fantasy Rant, we're going wide receiver heavy. We are going to start our rookie evaluations with Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll discuss some Dynasty bounce back wide receiver options. And if we have time, we're going to talk about some playoff matchups that we got coming up here. All right, let's just jump right into it, though. I'm excited to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. I am a Buckeyes fan, all Cleveland sports fan, Buckeyes. This is our guy, one of the best rookie prospects to ever come out. I don't think that's even hyperbole, really stating that. Dude is an absolute animal. I'll go last on this one, though. Why don't we send on over to Lee? What do you got here when you were breaking down the Marvin Harrison Jr. Film here?
Yeah, I mean, so you really can't run out of superlatives when you're watching him out there. The route running, the height, he has a knack for just finding the open spot in the field. The guy's one of the best wide receiver prospects the league has seen in quite some time, and we knew it last year before the season even started. In a star-studded wide receiver core of four, assuming Mecca goes in the first round next year, four first-round wide receivers, he was the standout. He's a guy that you're looking at as a cornerstone franchise dude, best receiver since Jamar Chase as far as grade and evaluation. We'll see what he runs in the 40, but his football speed is very fast. His hands are the hands were what really stood out to me. If the ball touches his hands, he's bringing them in.
Totally agree.
He's a can't miss wide receiver.
Evan?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, he is fast. He was clocked at 22.2 miles per hour this past year. He's just dominant in all three levels of the field, but especially the deep targets. He's just such a deep threat. And I remember when I first he came on my radar, I was watching CJ Stroud highlights, and I thought I was watching his highlights. He was pretty much the show of the highlights. Like that was like my biggest takeaway was Marvin Harrison Jr. is great. Turns out, CJ Stroud is also pretty good himself. But Marvin Harrison he's a rare talent, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. He's huge for that size, for what he is. It's just a rare combination.
Yeah, no, you brought up one of the stats I did not think anyone was going to bring up, the top mile per hour in game. That's impressive. That's a fast speed for anybody, and especially for a collegiate athlete. He's moving. He's big. He can break just like the 6'4" frame. He can bring in anything that hits that wide radius. And like you said, Lee, he's got the hands to do it. This dude, he's not going to lose the contested catch. It becomes much more than a 50-50 ball when you're throwing it up his way. He's got the body control. He's got incredible, one of the things I loved about QJ last year was that size speed combo. But one thing we all talked about is the body catches. The body catches were all over his film, and you can't do that in the NFL. You have good enough DBs that they're going to come over and punch that ball right out of your hands. I feel like we saw that throughout the season. But Marvin Harrison Jr. rarely catches with his body. He's incredible at high pointing it. It's that thing that we hear about all the time is like, when you see the ball thrown, he does not have to track it through the air. He sees it, he puts his head down, runs to the spot, and then high points the ball. Mm-hmm. That will do so much for any quarterback. And then especially, typically he's going to be at least a top 4 pick. There's no way he gets past the Cardinals at 4. So obviously Kyler's an exception. He's amazing. But the other 3 quarterbacks ahead of him, You got Justin Fields, Sam Howell, if they end up going Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of a quarterback, which I don't see happening, but maybe they go that route. And then, same thing with the Patriots. Maybe they go Marvin Harrison Jr. and roll with Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi or sign somebody in the offseason. He will, it will be such a boost to any of those quarterbacks' production, knowing that they have a guy that they can just throw a 50-50 ball up to, and this guy's going to high point and come down with it. So that being said, on top of all of that, it's not just the physicality that gets it done. He is a good route runner. If you guys know anything about his dad, Marvin Harrison was incredible route runner. He was not 6'4", and he was just incredible the entire time. Got it done before the catch. And I think that shows in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s tape. He's consistently 5-6 yards away from the CB covering him. So it's just insane, the list of positives when we're talking about this guy. And I think that any team that gets him is lucky to have him. And I would even consider, if I'm specifically the Commanders, I have enough faith in Sam Howell still, to the point where I think if you bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel is a free agent, but if you can get Marvin Harrison and then bulk up that offensive line with all that cap space you have, I'm pretty confident rolling out Sam Howell and winning some games next season.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on that, I think if you're whole new front office, whole new coaching staff, if they fall in love with a Michael Penix, fall in love with a Bo Nix, and they feel like that's their quarterback, I mean, you've got 2 early second-round picks. You have the flexibility. If you want to draft Marvin Harrison at 2, you can trade back into the back end of the first round if you feel like you need to and get one of those, those later quarterbacks. Obviously, if they, pull the rabbit out of the hat and hire Jim Harbaugh, he's probably going to trade back and get JJ, which I wouldn't be thrilled with. But yeah, I mean, that's where having all those picks gives you a lot of flexibility. One thing I would just add too, if you want to watch a game and really see the talent, I mean, the Georgia game from last season in the playoff, just dominated, a NFL defense essentially. 5 catches for a little over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in about a half of football before he got hurt, and maybe 3 quarters. But their offense was not the same without him out there. And the other one would be the Michigan game, which was a great game that they did lose, but he still performed well. 5 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown against, again, the best defense in college football this season.
Yeah. Yeah. No, honestly, he reminds me a lot of like a DK Metcalf, who's a little bit more versatile, but same like down the field running ability, same speed downfield, and same way to get it, like the contested catches, just better hands, more versatile.
You're right. And obviously DK is a beast. No one's built that. It's not like that tall and that strong is not a thing for too many of the guys anywhere, and even professional sports.
That tall, that strong, that fast.
Right. Exactly. But like you said, I do think that Marvin Harrison has stronger hands than he does, but he is a little bit, slimmer of frame at 6'4", 205.
Which allows him to get more separation, too, more versatile receiver.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit more agile. One of the things I had listed here is that he has above average agility for a guy that's 6'4".
Yeah.
But I would not list it as a strength nor a weakness. It's not like he's not agile. He's not making guys miss from time to time, but it's not like something that's in the repertoire. You're not going to see those Zay Flower crazy cut juke move, like stump stop. Okay, I'm gonna move on from that. But he's not gonna make too many guys miss. The only negative that I actually have listed for him is, generally speaking, when the first defender gets his hands on him, he does go down. And that's a part of being as tall as he is. And 205 is still a healthy weight, but it's not a crazy big weight. It's not a guy that's going to break through and run through a bunch of DBs at 205. So that's realistically the only downside I have for him. There was also, and this is so nitpicky that I wasn't going to bring it up, but I also have that occasionally he will run himself through a zone. You know, like he's on a crossing route. The guy's moving at freaking light speed. And I feel like occasionally he could have settled into a zone a little bit more. But overall, I still think he does that better than the average collegiate wide receiver and will continue to learn to do that in the NFL. So that's just being nitpicky.
I would agree. And I mean, you kind of have to get a bit nitpicky when you're looking at him, but kind of adding to your point about, not really getting a lot of yards after contact. He does go down pretty easily. The one weakness that kind of stood out to me would be, and it goes back to that weight. I mean, it's not super skinny, but he is a slender guy. He can get jammed, and you don't play a ton of physical cornerbacks in college. In the NFL, there's a lot bigger, a lot more physical cornerbacks. I feel like the way you guard him early is you put your biggest cornerback on him, jam him with safety help over the top. I think about 10 pounds of muscle, if he can bulk up to about 215, and I mean, naturally getting away from college and getting with a professional strength and conditioning coach, I don't see that being an issue, and that would really make him unstoppable.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then that you guys pretty much hit on everything that I could find. There wasn't much to find in terms of the negatives, but the missed tackles force. He only had 5 missed tackles this past year, 7 missed tackles the year before. So that kind of makes sense and why he's not getting a lot of screen opportunities. But again, he doesn't need those to be a dominant wide receiver for fantasy going forward too. So I'm still very confident in him and very, very looking forward to this.
Yeah. And we were all just talking about it, but yes, he was 40th amongst wide receivers that had at least 76 targets. So that's, narrowing it down quite a bit. He was 40th in yards after catch per reception, especially when you think of a guy that can create as much separation as he does. That's a type of guy that's going to, catch a short ball, run a ton after the catch, and create some big, for lack of a better word right now, discrepancies. Like he'll have a ton of big gains where he gets a ton of yards after catch. So you'd expect that number to be higher. It was just 6.4 yards after the catch, but I do think it ends up evening itself out because he is struggling to break through that first tackle. But we'll see where he can. Like Lee said, he's going to be with a professional strength and conditioning coach. I imagine he's going to stay around the same weight and size for the NFL combine, just because I think that he'll want to show off his speed and agility more than his a break tackle. But I think after he gets into the NFL, obviously, they're gonna bulk him up a little bit. I expect him to get up to probably around 208, 210 at least, and that's always basing the college. He's listed 6'4", 205. When I played baseball in college, they listed me as 6'3", 210. I was probably 6'2", more like 200 pounds. They give you a little bit, so
it's like the WWE billing, you got to add a couple inches and 20 pounds.
Dan Baker walking in at 6'8", 240 pounds. No, this boy Slim over here. So I can't even talk too much smack. But let's talk about ideal landing spots. Evan, I'll kick it off to you to start here. Where do you think is, let's not even say it's limited by draft capital where we expect him to go, just some beautiful situation. This team that you're talking about trades up and gets him where they need to. Where would you want him to land?
Well, in my opinion, it's got to be a team where the quarterback has a big arm, because you got to take advantage of his deep threat capabilities. So my ideal landing spot, there's a little bit of murky waters with this wide receiver room, but Josh Allen's got an arm. and I would love to see what he could do if he went to Buffalo. That would be incredible. Love the Chargers as well as an option. Basically, any quarterback with a deep throw or a good, nice arm. I would love to see him on any one of those teams, especially the Chargers. Definitely more ideal for me personally if he was a Chargers, but for the general consensus, I'm going to say Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean that would be especially with Diggs, it's kind of at the age cliff, some of the unhappiness. I mean, he could step right into that wide receiver one spot with a huge arm, and a guy that's not scared to throw it down the field. I'm going to go a little off the radar, but maybe an obvious one, and it will not happen. They don't have the draft capital. There's no way it happens. But Houston, back with C.J. Stroud, would be probably the obvious one.
Right.
A little more realistic, and again, I don't see them, making the moves to get up in the draft, but Kansas City.
Yep.
And
it's funny because I ended up taking a different team just because I knew that these teams would come up, especially if Mason was here too. I have in my notes, I have something easy would be the Bills, Chiefs, Texans, or Chargers. Because that would be incredible. That'd be very nice to see him on those teams, big arm quarterbacks. And also outside of the Texans, they don't really have a wide receiver 2 on any of those teams. Gabe Davis, on top of being so inconsistent, is a free agent this season. The Chiefs, you got Rashee Rice stepping into a role, but even if Rashee Rice is there, Marvin Harrison trumps him immediately.
Yeah, he would be coming too.
Right, and then the Chargers
be gone as well. So I mean that there could be a lot of targets to be had in that offense.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I obviously Keenan Allen's aging. I think Mike Williams personally I think is going to be cut for cap space this year, especially coming off of that ACL injury. And then we talked about Bills Chiefs. Okay, yeah, so that left me with the Jaguars. Calvin Ridley is going this year. He's going to be gone. I think that a great compliment to Christian Kirk would be Marvin Harrison Jr. Zay Jones, he's a solid outside wide receiver, but he's not a number one. You need a number one in that offense. I don't think they bring back Calvin Ridley. And then on top of it, Evan, you talked about it earlier, a guy who throws downfield frequently. So Trevor Lawrence, 13.3% of his attempts were 20-plus yard attempts. That's 6th highest in the league. And then the rest of these stats are minimum of 30 attempts downfield. So he was 3rd in attempts, 75 attempts of 20-plus yards, 2nd in completions, 7th in completion percentage, 4th in passing yards, 1st in touchdowns, and then he had the 16th fewest interceptions. He had a touchdown to interception rate of 11-3. That's not terrible when you're talking about exclusively targets that are 20-plus yards. On top of all that, this all comes from PFF. So one of their big things are big-time throws. Either throws that come in a very important situation or a tight window or a moderately tight window downfield. He was 1st in the league, 31 big-time throws this season. I feel like the perception on Trevor Lawrence is down overall, but I think that this is a perfect landing spot for him. They are at the 17th pick, obviously way too far to go out and get him, but they have all of their own picks through the first 4 rounds, an additional pick in the 4th round. Maybe they trade this year's first and next year's first, or a 1st, 2nd, and a guy who's on his last year of his deal to go up and get him. But that would be my ideal landing spot. Now let's talk realistic. I think we're probably going to land all on the same one of 4 teams at most.
Yeah.
But if we're talking realistic landing spots, Evan, where do you think he will land?
This is kind of a mix between I think he will and hope he will, because I really hope that he doesn't go to New England. If he goes to New England, I'm going to be so mad. But the Cardinals, I hope he goes to the Cardinals at this point. I think that that's a very realistic landing spot, given New England's need for a quarterback and Washington's need for a quarterback, and Chicago would be the other realistic one too. I really do think he could go 101 overall too, but I don't know. It would be tough. They'd have to have a lot more confidence in Justin Fields than I think they have. So,
what do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones. I mean, it's really hard to envision him. Sorry, Evan, I know you guys are at 5. It's hard to imagine him getting past the top 4. I mean, you could see the 3 quarterbacks, Caleb, Drake, and now Jaden Daniels being those top 3 picks. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion, and I could be totally off. I kind of feel like the Bears are going to be able to trade down and stay in front of Arizona, probably with New England, but it could be Washington. Trade back a pick or 2, pick up some more ammunition, stay with Fields, add Marvin Harrison to that offense. That's kind of – I think if I were the GM, that's what I would do.
That's exactly the note that I have written down right now.
Yeah.
I feel like the Patriots could have – like they're at 3. They could be like, okay, we want to jump over Washington and take our absolute stud. Like the project did not go well. Mac Jones is not the answer. Before that, obviously, 2 decades of Tom Brady. So they want to be – this is, in their mind at least, I bet probably one of the few opportunities that they'll have to go and get a generational talent at quarterback. If you can – capitalize on that, hit the right guy, it's going to be worth any amount of draft capital to move up and get him. So I agree. I think that they trade down with the Patriots. I think that the Bears could still grab him, run Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be incredible for all of my Justin Fields shares. Very much hoping for this. But if they don't, I do have the Bears listed as the realistic landing spot with that specific scenario. Evan, to your point, I do also see a world where the Bears like, you know what? We're not going to risk it. We're comfortable enough with Justin Fields. We're just going to take them at 101 if they don't get an interesting enough offer for a trade back.
Yeah.
So very specific scenarios, but that's what this time of year is about. We're all speculating, see who can be the best couch GM here. So that's my thoughts on it so far. I do think that the Cardinals would be a fantastic landing spot for him, both realistically and for fantasy. Doesn't seem like Marquise Brown is going to stick around after this free agency this offseason. And after that, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Rondale Moore. That's it. So him and Trey McBride too, so a little bit, tiny bit of competition there, but I'd be happiest if he does go to the Bears. I think they would alter their game plan and maybe not go quite as run heavy if he lands in Chicago.
Question for you guys. Just like I said, the Cardinals are definitely a heavy favorite to be one of the ones that gets them. Do we think that, let's say that happens, do we think that helps or hurts Trey McBride's dynasty value?
Hurts.
See, that's tough because, I would say overall on the season helps. If he's the only viable target at all, let's say they literally don't add anybody and let Marquise Brown walk. You have Michael Wilson as your main outside wide receiver, and then some combination of Greg Dortch and Rondale Moore in the middle. I know that there's an argument that just an insane amount of volume can come his way, but realistically, they're not going to be an efficient offense. On top of it, they have an aging James Conner in the backfield. If we're just talking about as is, nobody else added, I do think Marvin Harrison helps Trey McBride more than he hurts him.
No, I think Trey needs the targets to be producing what he's got right now. I think that you add Marvin Harrison Jr., you're taking away a lot of the targets. You have a new number one. Trey was the number one target. If you got a new number one target in that offense, you're just not going to see the volume that you need to produce what he was producing.
Well, I mean, how many times do you think they throw the ball, though?
This past year?
Well, I have that for Kyler Murray in his 8 games started, threw the ball 33 and a half times. He completed 22 of them. Let's just even divvy up the receptions. If it's 22 receptions and, let's say a third of them go to Trey McBride and a third of them go to Marvin Harrison, that's still 7 receptions per game. And I think both of them are athletic enough to make the most out of those receptions.
See, if Marvin Harrison gets a third, I don't think Trey gets a whole nother third himself either. I think maybe I do think he's the second most, targeted receiver on that team, but I do think that Michael Wilson could eat away into more targets than you give him credit for. maybe I'm a Michael Wilson truther. I did write an article.
I mean, this is just based off of last season, but the Cardinals targeted the tight end position on 33.1% of their targets.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think that can go down. I think you're right. I mean, there's no doubt, Evan, that the target would go down a bit with an alpha like that. But I would use Sam Laporta as an example of what a tight end can do with a true number one. His targets would go down, but his red zone targets would go up. And just having those scoring opportunities, the increase in the efficiency of the offense, I think, would overcome the loss of some of those catches.
See, I think Sam Laporta would have been much better than Trey McBride if he was in that play for the Cardinals. Like if they switched, I think that him on the Cardinals this year would have broke a lot of records.
He did break a lot of records.
A lot more, like break them. You know what I mean? Like he would have a better season than he had, which is hard to do.
Without looking into it too much, I just feel like the Lions are able to stay on the field because they have a certain level of talent on their offense. Whereas the Cardinals might not extend too many drives, some tough third downs, long thirds. I don't think they're staying on the field for those. And I think that's a big part of, like what creates fantasy production. Can you stay on the field? Can you get into the red zone? Can you create opportunities for touchdowns? It's all a very delicate give and take. So I do hear what you're saying. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is not there, and there's no additions made, Trey McBride honestly should get 40% of the targets, So like there's some room there for the argument. I definitely feel you. All right. So really quick before we move on to our next topic here, let's just talk trade value. Let's say, I think most people in Superflex draft leagues even probably have Marvin Harrison as at most the 103, and that's if the top 2 teams are desperate for quarterback. I think he's the 102 personally right now. If you guys are in a Superflex league and you got the 102 and you're chalking up Marvin Harrison Jr., what are you willing to trade away in order to what are you trading Marvin Harrison Jr. away for? What's worth it in your eyes?
We talking picks or players or combination?
You can go combination, anything you see fit here. If you want to go just straight up player comp too, where you see him fitting into the Dynasty wide receiver talk, that's fine as well.
I think I would want a top 5 receiver if I were going to move him. I mean, I think I'd want a CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra. I'd probably take Amon-Ra and improving it, what he's done. I think that's where I would begin to consider, though. I mean, those top 3, no doubt. I wouldn't trade him for any running back outside of maybe Gibbs or Bijan, but the shelf life is so short and it's so much longer. If I could get a top 5 quarterback in a Superflex league, I would certainly do that as well.
Yeah. I have the same wide receivers written down here too. Like I don't think anyone's trading away JJ, Chase, or Lamb for him. Although I will say, Evan, me and you were talking earlier, and I asked who you had ahead, CeeDee Lamb or Marvin Harrison Jr. You want to talk on that?
Yeah, I mean, we started it by talking like how many picks would it take, and I would trade 3 first-round picks for him. And you asked me the same question: would I do that for CeeDee Lamb? And I hesitated. I mean, I would probably end up doing it, but I wouldn't smash it just like I would with Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm looking at, I have 2 first-round picks and then a future first. I would trade that right now for Marvin Harrison Jr. No questions asked. And ideally, what I'd like to do though is get like a Devonta Smith, trade him and a first, try to get Marvin Harrison there. That's like an ideal. That's like an ideal.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely ideal because like
but
Devontae
it's
Smith's
not.
right.
Yeah,
Devontae
it's not
Smith's
gonna
not
happen.
worth 2 first-round picks in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. If you're a contender and you can trade away what you're expecting to be, 2024, 25, and 26 late first-round picks for Marvin Harrison Jr., I would do that. But that means you got to know your team's locked up for the next 3 years.
And nobody knows that. It's too unpredictable.
Exactly. Nobody knows that. Evan had a team that lost 1 game to his actual opponent and then 2 games against the median on the season. And he got beat by a guy that was in the 6th seed.
Yeah.
It's just the way fantasy goes. Teams can have that blow-up game at any given point. And, that it's beautiful. It's something that we love about the game. You're in it any week. But it's also so like detrimental to any of our mental health here. Like built up that team for years to come, got it locked in. You were talking a good amount of smack in the Slack channel there, and it happens to any one of us. So
yeah,
it's
in my main dynasty, I went
back to back. But
I'll say in my main dynasty, I went from the runner-up in year 1 to 10th place in year 2 to the championship in year 3. I mean, we're riding a roller coaster over here,
So prepare for the worst next year. All right. So I actually haven't read this yet, but we got a comment coming in. Just traded away the 2025 second and 2026 third for Eckler. My running backs are Tony Pollard, Jalen Warren, Deonta Foreman, Israel Abanikanda. Do you guys? Oh, Tyler Algier, Jamal Williams. Thoughts on the trade? Lost in semis last year. Not super flex. It's a 1 QB, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end / flex. So of these running backs that you have here, Pollard's in the contract year. Jalen Warren's stuck on the Steelers, who also have Najee Harris that's there for at least the next year, if not more, because he was a first-round pick. Deonta Foreman is not going to be much moving forward. Israel Abanikanda stuck behind Breece Hall. Tyler Algier, now with freaking Arthur Smith gone, you'd think he'd probably take a little bit of a dip in the snap percentage there. And then Jamal Williams, alongside Kendre Miller and Alvin Kamara, both have contracts through the next 2 years at least. Kamara's 2 years, and Kendre Miller's 3 years from now. So in this trade, I'll take Eckler just because we don't know where he's going to land, but it seems he didn't mention whether it's full PPR or not. Especially if it's full PPR, I can at least see Eckler going to some team and getting the pass catching role there. Yes. And that will give a ton of value to your team, especially with a lot of question marks here. Really, got to start 2 running backs, and with Pollard not knowing where his destination is going to be, Warren's got a ton of promise, but again, he's behind Najee Harris. So I think this is a good move for this team. I'm willing to bargain with some future later round picks to get some proven talent. And Eckler really, he is older. He is a running back, but we've seen him produce even at an older age when he doesn't have a high ankle injury that's hampering him. So I do think that he'll get healthy and end up looking like a better version of himself than he did this year. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I love this. Actually, I'll find a new player, but when we were going to go over RBs, Austin Eckler was my RB bounce back. So I'll find a new one to replace him. But, he finished.
We're not talking about it today, so you can keep him.
Yeah, well, I kind of want to dive into a little bit of what I was going to bring up then, too. I mean, he had almost the least receptions in his career. And, receptions are where he's at his best. So I think that he does move to go back into that role, whether he sides with the Chargers or a new team. I think he gets that role back. And he's at an all-time, you could not buy him at this price last year. Not a chance. It was just 1 year difference. So I think that that's a great value, especially given that the RB, at first glance, this RB class not looking great. And with that RB room you have, you needed something. So I definitely approve of this trade. Happy you did that.
So I read it backwards at first, and I thought you traded Eckler for the picks, but Dan read it, and but I'm going to be a little more pessimistic about it than Dan or Evan. I see Austin Eckler as very much Dalvin Cook from a year ago, where this time next year his dynasty value may be completely gone. The being that they're a year, 2 years out on the picks, it's not a bad gamble, especially that you feel like you lost in the semi. You feel like you have a chance to win a championship. But I tell you, I'm probably looking to move him if, depending on what happens, who he signs with. Early in the year, if he has a good game or two, I would be looking to flip him. If he signs with somebody and people get excited, I might even try to recoup and go ahead and get an early 24 second, draft a Trey Benson, a Braylon Allen. There's not much room left on that runway. He could provide value for 1 year at the most. Beyond that, he's going to be a dead asset. So unless he brings you a championship, helps you win a championship in 24, you've given up not great future assets, but you've given up some future assets for somebody who's just going to die on your bench.
I think he's got a little bit of a longer timeline. He doesn't have too much tread on the tires. He took a while for him to get into the starting role and really see the volume that takes a hit to a lot of the I guess the lifetime for a running back. But I see a few more good seasons out of him.
And I think this is entirely dependent on the format. If it is full PPR, then I have a lot more faith than even half PPR. Without knowing what team he's going to land on, I do think he has more juice than we saw this season. It was difficult watching that because I honestly made a whole ass article about Austin Eckler being a buy low candidate after a couple weeks return from the high ankle sprain, and it just never bounced back. It didn't happen. That's frustrating when you've seen that level of play from a running back for so long. And I know it even more frustrating for Evan watching all those Chargers games. But I do think that Austin Eckler has a little bit of something to give. If we're talking about just pure receiving, outside of McCaffrey and Kamara, can you name like a better receiving running back? Maybe Gibbs starting to jump into that range.
100% Gibbs at this point.
Well,
1,000% Gibbs at this point. And
Gibbs in terms of after the catch, after the ball's in his hands, he's going to make more happen. But just like pure receiving skill, I've seen like Eckler cross the middle and get messed up. Not the word I was going to use, but messed up over the middle. I don't know if I've seen Gibbs do that too many times.
Well, I think some of that was just, there was nobody around him because he was so fast. He's running so free.
That's fair. Separation is the thing. No, I like that. So we'll say McCaffrey, Kamara, and Gibbs. But after that, maybe Bijan. But really, he's a top 5 receiving running back still. Some team's going to value that no matter where he goes. So, I would love to see him, take the complementary role in Washington. If they keep that pass-heavy, the passing attack, they keep just Brian Robinson because Antonio Gibson's going to be gone. Chris Rodriguez is the only back in that depth chart there. So I think he would be a perfect type of fit for that kind of offense. That being said, I would hope that they don't add both like a Marvin Harrison Jr., a tight end in the free agency. He needs some opportunity to get it done. Part of the reason why he was the running back, I think it was 1 and 2 over the not this year, but the 2 years prior, was because obviously Keenan Allen and Mike Williams had huge injuries during that time. So he needs that volume, but I do think that he's still got more juice left in the tank, and a second round 2025 and third 2026. I'm willing to move on from that if you're a contender.
I think one other thing, just real quick before we move on from that, is, one, he was incredible the 2 prior years, but at his age, you don't see many running backs have big bounce back seasons when they fall off the cliff. And I think I actually had him as a bounce back when we talked about it, but it's hard to come back from that. And there's a better than zero chance that he's not in the NFL next year, that he retires. And I know you guys are going to disagree with that. The reason I say that is some of the wear and tear, being hurt, but also he's a super bright guy. He's set up for a career in media already. If somebody doesn't give him a good chunk, if somebody wants to, he's not signing anywhere for a vet minimum. I don't see that.
100%.
He's going to have to get paid something.
No, that's a great point to bring up, because he's already setting up his future. He's got the podcast with Matt Harmon, talking about it's a great bounce back between a guy that has an insane amount of wide receiver and route running knowledge in Matt Harmon, and then a guy that's been through it and can talk about the actual NFL experience in Austin Eckler. Fun podcast. Listen to it when you're done listening to our podcast. All right, so that's going to kick it off into our Dynasty bounce back wide receivers here. I'm going to kick it off because we were kind of touching on the Commanders here. I have Terry McLaurin as a Dynasty bounce back. I know Lee's about this, being a Commanders fan, but I cannot get off the Terry train, man. He's too good. He is way too good. It was weird having a quarterback that had as much fantasy value in a redraft setting as Sam Howell did this season, without seeing any wide receiver or tight end having substantial value. I think this is going to change there's going to be some positive regression for Terry McLaurin. We already know Eric Bieniemy, he can run a solid offense. He can wreck it. You think he's gone too?
Oh, he's definitely gone. 100%.
I mean, I've heard all the reports. I mean, obviously Ron Rivera is gone, but why? You don't believe in Eric Bieniemy as a play caller or player leader?
I think the two most likely guys that would get the job are going to be offensive minded. Ben Johnson's the heavy favorite right now. I just don't see a guy who's an offensive minded head coach coming in and keeping somebody as a coordinator that's not his guy. And very likely he's going to be the play caller anyway. The one scenario that where Bieniemy could possibly stay on would be Mike McDonald, if they do bring in a defensive coordinator from Baltimore. But Bobby Slowick or Ben Johnson seem to be the two favorites, and they're both play calling, offensive minded coaches. I think Bieniemy will probably be offensive coordinator somewhere next year, but I don't think it's going to be in DC.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying. I do think that makes sense if you bring in a head coach that is a play caller, that you're going to get rid of Bieniemy. So I hear what you're saying there. I do think that regardless if they bring in a stud offensive coordinator or they end up keeping Bieniemy, that they are going to focus on Terry McLaurin. I don't think it's going to be the same spread it around offense. Curtis Samuel, he wasn't even healthy all of the year like Curtis Samuel typically does. But I think in terms of points per game, he led the team. Jahan Dotson was nothing on that team. But Terry McLaurin is the true guy that can get it done at any point on the field. He has just he's signed through 2025. He does have a dead cap of 18.1 mil with just a cap hit of 24.1 mil. So, cap savings of 6 million next year. Don't think that they're going to get rid of him. The year after that, his cap hit does go down. His dead cap goes significantly down. So they could save about 18 million by cutting him in 2025. However, he's still only going to be 30 years old in 2025, 2 seasons from now. He's only going to be 30 years old. I don't think he's going to fully hit that age cliff yet. He's an elite route runner, 81st percentile against man coverage, 95th percentile against press, and he runs all of his routes pretty much on the outside. It's not like one of those guys that you mix into the slot and, try to get the mismatch. He's running a lot of his routes against press. and he has one of the highest success rates against that. I think the Commanders bring in probably Drake May at the second pick. It's some possibility that Caleb Williams is there, but either one, either one of them is going to be able to support, I think, a top 18 wide receiver. I think at worst he is a high-end wide receiver 2 in 2024. He is a little bit older, so as far as dynasty bounce back goes, this is more based on value. So that being said, right now Fantasy Pros has him ranked as the wide receiver 35 in dynasty. Some guys ahead of him that I would take Terry McLaurin over: Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin. Some guys directly behind him in the same tier that the Fantasy Pros has him at: Deontay Johnson, Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton, and Marquise Brown. They're all within 5 wide receiver spots in the ranking there. And I do think that he is significantly better than the rest of that group. What do you guys think, though, as far as Terry McLaurin as a bounce back?
I've never been high on Terry. I really we've talked about this for a couple of years now, Dan. He's too scary for me to put in my lineups. He's been so hit or miss sometimes.
No pun.
And so he's shown out in garbage time to absolutely save your week, but relying on that is scary. It's tough. You don't have a lot of confidence putting him up there, but he is he's still young. He's still got opportunity, and he's still got the speed too, and he's got the talent that can, with all the stats that you listed off too. I mean, it's pretty clear that you should be able to trust him, but he's just got a negative stigma. I'm just not able to get away from for him.
It's the vibe.
It's the vibe. Yeah. It's the vibe.
So I'm on board. And a couple of points I would make in favor. One, he's the first wide receiver in Washington franchise history to have 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. That includes some really good wide receivers: your Art Monk, your Ricky Sanders, going all the way to Santana Moss, a few years of Deshaun Jackson. He wasn't there 4 years, but first wide receiver to ever do it. They did it on the last drive in garbage time, but they got him his 1,000. The quarterbacks that he has played with since he's been in Washington: Alex Smith on one leg, Dwayne Haskins, RIP, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Ryan Fitzpatrick for one quarter, Garrett Gilbert, Carson Wentz, and now Sam Howell.
Yep.
To do 1,000 yards a season with those guys throwing to you is very impressive. Yeah. I don't see him going anywhere. Definitely not this year, but even beyond that, the next year, he's a type of guy who could even re-sign and finish his career in Washington. He is a consummate locker room leader. He is the leader of the team. You're bringing in presumably a rookie quarterback. There's a lot of youth otherwise with a new staff. You want a guy like Terry in your locker room. I cannot see any world of any offensive coordinator, any offense that's brought in where he's not getting a higher target share next season. Even if Sam Howell's back, they would spend all offseason telling him, throw the damn ball to Terry McLaurin. There's no way that you don't get the ball to him. The one, and I think it's way out there. If they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 2, that hurts. That hurts his value.
I planned on kicking it to y'all and then ending with that exact point, man. We're on the same mindset here. Yeah, if they draft Marvin Harrison, that's going to be tough sledding for Terry next year. But even the last 4 years, you're talking about 4 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. In 2019, 919 yards, not far off. And then the last 4 seasons, wide receiver 28, 14, 25, and 20. None of those seasons did he have more than 5 receiving touchdowns. I think there's some room for positive regression. He had 7 in his rookie season. The dude's a beast. He's there. And I think that if they do bring in Caleb Williams or Drake May, that they are pro-ready enough to be able to support this guy. So I'm ready for a Terry McLaurin bounce-back season. But I digress. Let's kick it on over to Evan for his dynasty bounce-back wide receiver.
Yeah, you actually kind of brought him up there when you're talking about the tier above with Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin. So Chris Godwin is my bounce-back player. He's 27, so a little bit younger than Darren McLaurin, but that's still a prime age for wide receivers. He finished with over 10 yards per catch when given opportunity. The thing is, he just didn't get a lot of opportunity this year. Baker is about to get paid. He hasn't developed the best chemistry with him, but he's able to prove like that. You can depend on him. When he's needed. So if Mike Evans does eventually leave or falls off, I think Godwin's prime for a significant upgrade. Barring any other additions to this wide receiver room, and I'm full sending it. He's definitely a trade target for me too, because he's cheap right now too with how he did this past season. I mean, I think a second would be very generous.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'm a Godwin truther. He's got a lot of talent. Another year removed from the injury. Specifically, if Mike Evans is gone, that opens up a lot of targets. Not the biggest Baker fan, but hey, what he's done this year speaks for itself. It's still a little questionable, what's going to happen with Evans. But either way, I agree. I think his value is too low right now, and receivers, with his skill set can produce, 32, 33. I think you still have a really solid 3 to 5 year window with Godwin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you brought it up. I think if Mike Evans leaves, that is a game changer. Godwin, I do think is talented enough to be a wide receiver one in an offense that needs it. I wouldn't prefer him to be my wide receiver one. I don't think he gets it done on all levels of the field, but short to intermediate routes, the guy kills it. Baker Mayfield is not it. He's been doing better this season. I have known him to hold on to the ball a little bit too long, So that's not Chris Godwin's game. He needs a guy that's going to get the ball out quick and accurately, consistently. But I do think that Baker's done enough to return, and he's shown enough improvement to the point where, especially if Mike Evans leaves, Chris Godwin will see the volume that he needs in order to take a huge step up. And he's got the contract as well. Let me check this out really quick, but I believe he signed through 2025. I think he just got a 3-year deal last year.
Yeah.
All right. So he's signed through next season.
Okay.
The dead cap is way too high to cut him. He's got a cap hit of 27.5 mil with a dead cap of 26.3 mil. Even if they waited after June 1st, that's $18.8 million. Not enough room in the budget there to cut him, especially with the production you'll get out of him. So without any other true talent there, and I think Mike Evans, even at his old age, will probably be demanding a good chunk of change here. Mm-hmm. I think that Chris Godwin is primed for a bounce back season for sure. Last year, it's just like he was consistent, but consistently so average. So average. Didn't have the big games until the end of the year, or that one game that Mike Evans missed in the middle of the season. But yeah, in full PPR, he was 10.1 points, 10.8. That one game that Mike Evans missed, 19.4, 13.7, 17.8, 3.6, 9.4, 9.9. Everything else is within 10 to 13 points. He just didn't win you a week, but didn't lose you a week. Kind of frustrating for where you drafted him, but I like him as a bounce back for sure. All right. Let's send it Lee's way here. I like your bounce back pick, selfishly, because he's on my Dynasty squad. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost more of a breakout versus a bounce back, because he hasn't had that true breakout yet. But the guy's 6'4". He can run. He has incredible hands. The route running is there. Everything is there for Drake London. And the main thing for him is Arthur Smith is not there. So we're getting a new coach, a new regime in there. Arthur Smith didn't like targeting his high round, early first round skill position offensive players for some reason. I think all three, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan, I think all their value goes up, but I think Drake's goes up the most. Specifically anticipating a quarterback upgrade. They're not going to run it back with Desmond Ridder. Taylor Heineke's a good backup in the NFL, but he's not the guy you want to depend on. There's some movement. There's some guys available. Heck, even if they were to bring in Jameis Winston, and we know how good he is for wide receiver value, but I don't think that'll happen. I could see Justin Fields if the Bears move on. I think that Atlanta's a pretty heavy favorite there. So we know that the quarterback upgrade is coming in some form. Maybe it's Russell Wilson. I don't, who knows? But Atlanta's not going to run it back. They're going to be better on offense because the skill positions are there. And you look at Drake's last season, it was a disappointment if you drafted him. He had 9 games with 4 receptions or less. This guy has way too much talent. Kind of going back to Terry McLaurin, but Drake's only 22. He has way too much talent not to get a bigger target share. He's only 22 years old. He's still maturing and getting better. He's a guy who I would love to buy in Dynasty in the offseason. Really, I want to buy him early before we make that quarterback move if I can, because people are going to get excited again. We'll see what happens with the coaching staff. I know Belichick's the favorite now, and that's not super exciting, especially if he brings along Bill O'Brien or Josh McDaniels. Yeah, I hate to even say that name. But honestly, those wouldn't be worse than what Arthur Smith did to us last year, did to them. So he's a guy who has every measurable in the book. He's an early first-round pick. He's going to be there for 3 more seasons. If we said that before Arthur Smith got fired, that would be a negative. But he's going to be in a consistent – you got to think this coaching staff is going to get a little bit of time. But the biggest thing, again, is upgrading the quarterback and the play caller. He's primed for a big season in 24.
Yeah, he's definitely like – well, I like the way you put that. Like out of those 3 offensive players, he's definitely raised the most with the change here. But especially because like Kyle Pitts, so you're just looking at the tape. He looks bad on the tape. There's a reason why he's not getting those targets, things like that. When you look at the tape on Drake London, there's no reason why he should not have gotten more targeted like that and more use. He's very young. Love that too. So he checks a lot on my list. I think that his price is still too expensive for me to go after him though right now. I wouldn't trade a first for him. Maybe I would. I probably would, but not an early first.
Not an early first. I agree with that. But I think Drake London, like Lee, obviously you said it, is Arthur Smith leaving just does so much. Like why do you run the ball so much in 2022? And then as soon as you draft a running back at 108, you just decide to, run the ball less, split the ball between him and Tyler Algier, your 4th-round pick from the year prior. Not Drake London has been so-so. He's got his blow-up games, and so-so is being pretty kind. In full PPR formats, wide receiver 31 and 37. But he, even with the wide receivers around him just being absolutely nothing, he in double teams, he shined through, press up. Like no matter what they throw at him, the guy is able to break through. It's just a fact of, can his quarterback get the ball to him? So I think at with the 8th pick overall, maybe they move up. Even if they don't, there's a decent chance that they're gonna land one of these quarterbacks that I think will be an upgrade regardless. We got Jaden Daniels right now. PFF has him on the big board as the 11th overall pick. Michael Penix Jr. is the 20th pick. Bo Nix 22nd. Any 3 of those quarterbacks is a significant upgrade from the combination of Taylor Heineke and why am I blanking right now? Probably because of all the makers, Mark. But so I just think anybody's going to be an upgrade over those 2 guys that they had there. And Drake London has the talent. He's going to win out when he's given the opportunity. And if you like Lee, you touched on earlier, if they end up getting Justin Fields somehow, can you imagine that RPO? Like who's going to take the ball? Justin Fields, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, or Drake London? That's a fantastic RPO option there. So I'm happy if they end up going that route. Really going to be sad if they do get Bill Belichick and, like you said, some combination of Josh McDaniels. And
I think Bill Belichick would hurt Bijan, though. I have a history with him and running backs with what he's done to the Patriots, and he loves the committees. So It's tough.
Yeah, no, I agree. A teardrop one singular teardrop will drop if Bill Belichick goes to the Falcons. We don't need that mess in the running back system here. So that is gonna do it, though. Would have loved to talk a little bit of playoffs, but we're running out of time. Really quick, let's go over the 4 games that we got here. We got I'll just name it off right in order so you guys can list it off as well. Houston at Baltimore, Green Bay at San Fran, Tampa Bay at Detroit, Kansas City at Buffalo. You guys have any upsets in this game, or all the home teams are the favorites this week? Who do you guys got?
It's tough. It's tough. I want, like, there's what I want to happen and what I think would happen. They're very different
What you
things.
think will happen? I'll speed run it really quick. I'll go Baltimore over Houston, San Fran over Green Bay. I think Tampa Bay and Detroit will be close, but I'm going to go with Detroit. And then I do think, man, it's tough. I live in Western New York. I want Buffalo to win, but I know even in that Steelers game, there was a point in time where we're like, this is getting too close. I'm going to go Kansas City in a tight one.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate to what the consensus is and things like that too. I mean, I got 2 teams that I'm still rooting for. I got the Bills because, again, same area, and then I'm rooting for the Packers as well. But the Packers definitely more of a long shot against San Fran. Definitely more of a long shot. So I think that's pretty set in stone. But yeah, gotta be careful.
How about Houston, Baltimore, and Tampa Bay and Detroit?
I think that Detroit wins against Tampa Bay, and then I like Baltimore. Baltimore's pretty clear in day, but the Tampa Bay and Detroit one is more of a toss-up for sure. That's a hard
I think
one.
that's my most interesting one on the week.
Yeah. You guys are still underselling Detroit. You all 3, including Mason, picked them to lose last week. I was the only one over here on Detroit Island. They almost did, but they pulled it out.
I was gonna say, they were one holding call away from making that happen.
I mean, it's crazy how different that half went. Having a 52-point over, and they scored 38 in the first and only get 9 points in the second half total. But give me Detroit. I'm going chalk this week, all home teams. So Buffalo versus the Ravens, Detroit versus San Francisco in the championship games, and a little preview. I'm taking both away teams to go to the Super Bowl in the championship week. Detroit, Buffalo, Super Bowl.
I like Detroit, Buffalo in the Super Bowl. Can you imagine the battle of fans that want it more? Detroit and Buffalo, that'd be great to see. I do personally think that Tampa Bay's got a good shot this week. I know you're talking. I like Detroit. I think in all aspects of the game, outside of the secondary, both teams have a terrible secondary, and I think that Tampa Bay passing attack is a little bit more potent than Detroit's, just because they don't have anything after Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta. But also, really quickly on last week's game, Sam Laporta was expected to be a long shot to play. So that was one of the reasons why I was rolling with the Rams. Did not think Laporta was going to make it for this one, but props to him for getting out there. Love that dude. Props to you guys if you got him in the rookie drafts here. Insane second round value. We're going to be talking more and more rookies coming up here, doing some more rookie evaluations. We're going to be doing some startup mock drafts. Make sure you're staying tuned. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff coming up here. All right, take it easy, y'all.
See you. Playoffs.
Playoffs.
Playoffs.